Today we'll be discussing a halachic discussion to the describing the laws of Kol Isha. Kol Isha means the prohibition that a man has where he's not allowed to listen to a woman sing. So we'll discuss the parameters, when does it apply, when doesn't it apply, what to do if a woman is singing, when is it permitted, when is it not permitted. We'll describe all these concepts. It was very common for people who are involved in Kiruv that a lot of times you have women who come to the house for Shabbos and they're not so observant. So during the Zmiris they want to sing, so we'll try to describe to the best of our abilities the different halachas and the different ramifications. Before we begin, as always, the should not be relied upon for halachic psak, and a rav should be consulted. So the Gemara in Brachos introduces us to the concept. It's in Brachos Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph. It says Amar Rav Yitzchak teaches Tefach B'isha Erva. He's describing different parts of the body, the woman's body that needs to be covered, that not allowed to be seen. Amar Rav Chizda Shoik B'isha Erva. Amar Shmuel Kol B'isha Erva. Shmuel says the voice of a woman is considered an erva, is considered nakedness, it has to be concealed. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Ki kailech arev umarech nava, that your voice is beautiful. So we see from this pasuk that the voice of a person is has a very powerful ability to really affect someone, and listening to the voice of a woman sing can cause connection that the man has with that woman, and it's not necessarily a good thing. It could be inappropriate. It could lead to inappropriate thoughts, and therefore it's not allowed. And for anyone who questions the validity of such a concept, it's 100% true. Music and singing has a strong effect on the soul, a strong effect on the neshama. When a person hears a woman sing, it creates a connection that's not necessarily the best connection. That's what the Gemara tells us. This is brought down in Shulchan Aruch, in Even Ezer, Siman Chaf Aleph, Sif Aleph, also Lishmaya Kol Erva, you're not allowed to listen to the voice of a woman. Now, there's a discussion amongst the Achronim as to whether this prohibition is biblical or is it rabbinic. The Sdei Chemed in Klal Kuf, Ois Mem Beis, writes that it is he quotes that it is a machlokas. There's a disagreement amongst the poskim whether it's a biblical prohibition to listen to a woman sing or a rabbinic. The Chachmas Adam in Klal Dalet and Nishmas Adam Ois Aleph writes the following: Milsa de Pshitahi, it's simple to me, the Kol Isha, this prohibition of listening to a woman sing, after Amrin to have a erva, even though it's true you're not allowed to listen to a woman sing, Hainu Midrabanan. This is a creation of the Rabbanan, this is a rabbinic prohibition. It's a rabbinic enactment. Shari lo mitzina b'kra to have erva, because there's no source in the Torah that says that you're not allowed to listen to a woman sing. Ela to have a noila isha. The only source we have is that a woman's voice is considered beautiful, but we don't have a prohibition clearly in the pasuk, and therefore lachein asura chachamim. Therefore, it's only a rabbinic prohibition. The Rabbanon enacted a prohibition to avoid any person from having inappropriate thoughts, to avoid a person from doing things they're not allowed to. They forbade a man from listening to a woman sing. Now, obviously, we're going to see that Rav Moshe says whenever you're dealing with concepts of the erva, concepts where the Yetzer Hara is very strong, if you're makbid on these halachas, it's kaddish v'yayimru lach. It's considered a very holy thing. So, although we're going to see there are certain leniencies, it may not be the best to be lenient when it comes to these halachas. These halachas are very, very important because whether we appreciate it or not, for a man to have inappropriate thoughts and to be, not to necessarily be makbid on sneas and arayas is something that's really devastating, and it's something that really we have to be very nizar on. So these halachas, these are according to many poskim, this is a rabbinic prohibition not to listen to a woman sing. Now, I'm not going to get into it right now, but there's a lot of young guys. The big question, I don't know why it comes up for shidduchim, it comes up in general. Do you listen to non-Jewish music? So, listening to non-Jewish music is a different discussion in its own right. I'm not going to get involved with it right now. But whether you listen to it or not is not really that. Whatever. It's not for our discussion. But if there's a woman singing, then it's clearly prohibited. Meaning, you'll have certain religious people that'll say, I listen to non-Jewish music. I'll listen to songs that are performed and orchestrated by non-Jews. But if a woman sings, no one's allowed to listen to that. If a person tells you he listens to non-Jewish music and he listens to women sing, then it's another way of saying, I'm not listening, I'm not keeping this halacha. There's no question, a man is not allowed to listen to a woman sing. And we'll discuss exactly what this means. So let's begin. There's actually a very interesting machlokas rishonim whether the prohibition is only listening to a woman sing or even listening to a woman speak. And that sounds radical, but there were certain rishonim that even implied that a man is not allowed to listen to a woman speak. Let's say if a woman's giving a speech, you shouldn't be allowed to. Their source for it is the Gemara in Kedushin. The Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Ayin Amid Aleph says, Neshadele Mar Rav Yehuda Shalma Yalta. Rav Yehuda came and was eating at, I think it was Ula's house, and they told Rav Yehuda, say hello to the host. Yalta was the wife, and she was the host. You should say hello to her. Amalei Halchi Amar Shmuel Kol Isha Erva. He says, I'm not allowed to. I can't speak to her. Kol Isha Erva. You're not allowed to hear a woman sing. So now she wasn't singing; they were speaking. Yet this Gemara indicates that you're not allowed to even listen to a speech, which is a very, very, very big stringency. So what's the halacha? So most Rishonim and most poskim say that it's not a problem, that it's okay to listen to a woman speak. The problem is listening to a woman sing. And the reason why that Gemara was being machmer was because it was a different issue. It's that Rav Yehuda, on Rav Yehuda's level, he didn't feel it was necessary to have this conversation. In that time period, in that civilization, and in that situation, Rabbanim didn't speak to the host if it wasn't necessary. So therefore, he said, I can't speak to her because Kol Isha Erva. I'm not allowed to hear the woman speak. It wasn't that she was singing, and it doesn't extend to speech as well. It was just his way of saying, this is an unnecessary speech. I can't. It's unnecessary for me to speak to her, and therefore, in that society, it was accepted that because it wasn't necessary, it was inappropriate. The poskim do point out that nowadays we do say hello. Now, that being said, we have to obviously understand you have to know this is when you have to speak to Rabbanim. The amount of speech that one should have between the opposite sex is not necessarily clear. You could probably say hello and speak, I guess, the minimum amount that's considered appropriate, but when you start going overboard, that's obviously where bad things can happen. I was at a wedding, and it was a mixed seating, so they sat me at a mixed seating, and I noticed that they were all couples together. Not one man was speaking to his wife. They were only speaking to other women's wives, and vice versa. That's not so good. You know, what we see from this Gemara is that although it's not a problem of Kol Isha, because we paskin that Kol Isha does not apply to speech, but there's obviously an amount that you can go overboard, and you could speak to another married woman. You could say hello, and you could say the food is lovely, and you could even speak a little bit, but to how far you go, that's obviously not for now, and that's obviously where Rabbanim have to be discussed. You have to know exactly the appropriate and not the appropriate level, not for right now. So what I want to do right now is list the different type of women, and to tell you when it's allowed, when it's not allowed. Meaning, are you allowed to listen to your wife sing, your sister, your daughter, all these things. I'll go through them. Now, just to be clear before we start, during davening, while a man is davening, he is not allowed to listen to any woman sing, no matter who it is, his wife, his daughter, his mother. When a man is davening, or he's benching, or he's saying brachos, or he's saying Kriya Shema, Shemana Esrei, not one woman's voice is allowed to be heard. It doesn't matter if it's his wife, if it's his mother, it does not matter. During Kriya Shema is not allowed. Now, the reason for this is, I'll just read you what the Chassam Sofer writes. The Chassam Sofer writes in Choshen Mishpat, Siman Kuf Tzadi, the Chassam Sofer writes that the reason why during davening and during brachos we're so stringent, ki anu ma'aminim, because we believe shekol tefillah is shevach v'hoidah. Anytime you praise Hashem or you daven to Hashem, we believe shemisariv machshava hi shumhir. If there's at all even a tiny iota of inappropriateness that's happening in your mind as you daven, afilu be'ishta, even if it's with your wife, you're thinking about your wife, and it's not considered, no one would consider that inappropriate, but when you're davening, you have to have a much higher standard of kedusha when you're speaking to Hashem. So therefore, during davening, there's such a necessity to be pure, that even if there's a tiny bit mixed in of something that should not be there, then it's going to be hard to get the davening up there, because you got to understand, when you're davening to Hashem, the tefillah is going to a very, very lofty place, and therefore we have to act accordingly. It's like when a king comes to your house, all of a sudden you'll start painting. So it's like during the Aser Simei Tshuva, many are makbid. It's brought down by the Paiskim. Many are makbid that during Aser Simei Tshuva, the 10 days, beginning with Rosh Hashanah and ending with Yom Kippur, many people are makbid not to eat cholav yisrael, cholav stam if they normally eat cholav stam, not to eat pas palter, meaning to try to go on a higher level during the Aser Simei Tshuva, and then after Yom Kippur they go back to the regular halacha. So some people ask, isn't that being false? Isn't that being fake? Like all of a sudden during Aser Simei Tshuva, when we're being judged, we're all of a sudden pretending to be all proper, and then afterwards we're going back to a standard. What's going on? So the answer is very simple. It's not considered going down. It's not fake. It's the equivalent of a king coming to your house. If a king comes to your house, if you're hosting the president, all of a sudden you paint the walls and you mop the floors. Why? It's not pretending to be something you aren't. It's that when you're living amongst your house with your family, you're okay with a certain standard. But when the president comes, when the Rebbe comes, when the king comes, you have to up your game. You have to now bring your house to the standard of the guest that's coming. So it's the same thing during Aser Simei Tshuva. During Aser Simei Tshuva, normally we're okay with eating pas palter, and normally we're okay with doing this and doing that. But during Aser Simei Tshuva, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu's here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, so to speak, the guest in your home, you have to bring it to a higher standard. So says the Chassam Sofer, normally we're going to see that there are certain women that a man is allowed to listen to. Let's say his mother. Most poskim assume that a mother and daughter, a man is allowed to listen to his mother sing. That's the assumption of most poskim. We'll see. But says the Chassam Sofer, during davening and during tefillah and during bakashas and haidah, when you're talking to Hashem, you have to have a much higher standard. And therefore, during davening, we have to separate. There has to be a complete separation. It's the same way, when we daven, we have a big mechitzas in shul. Afterwards, a lot of times you go to weddings, you go to kiddushes. Not the same. What's the difference? The answer is because during davening, we have to have a much higher standard. This is when we're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to do your best to have as much pure thoughts as you can. And listening to a woman sing during davening, we have a much more stringent attitude than not during davening. That's what the Chassam Sofer says. So I want to go through some of the people and list and try to describe what the halachas are. So let's begin. The first one I want to talk about, the first category, is a married Jewish woman. Eishes Ish, your classical married Jewish woman. So the Magen Avram writes, Be'evan Ezer Simcha Aleph Mashma de Kol Zemer Eishes Ish La'olam Asul Lishmaya. You are never allowed to listen to a married Jewish woman sing. Never. There's no circumstance that would allow a man to listen to another married woman sing if it's not your wife. No circumstance. So that's clear. Awesome. And I hate to be machmer, but at the end of the day, as much as I am afraid of being a machmer and scaring people off, you have to paskin correctly. You got to tell people the halacha the way it is. And I'll just say this before we even continue. I'm sorry to go on a tangent, but there's a concept brought down by the Marshal. That the Marshal writes that one of the averis that's Yaharik Val Yaver, you have to give up your life for, is paskening incorrectly on purpose. What I mean is that for a rabbi to say something is permitted when it is not permitted, and he knows it's not permitted, but he just wants to be lenient for people, if a rabbi does that, that's a very, very, very grave sin. Because let's say someone does an averos, they do a sin, that's a bad thing. We all understand that's a bad thing. But once the rabbi starts giving you permission to sin, now not only is the person sinning, but now the rabbi is tampering with the authenticity of the Torah. the rabbi who represents the posek, who represents halacha, is now telling you it's okay to drive on Shabbos, it's okay to text on Shabbos. To say such a thing is a terrible, terrible sin, and it's worse than a person texting. What's worse than a person texting on Shabbos is a person texting on Shabbos with permission from a rabbi. Because now, the rabbi is not only, he's saying this person is allowed to do this, he's tampering with the authenticity of the Torah. He's not allowed to do that. It's like, this is true, I wrote about this in the Sefer Mekar B'Yamin in the introduction, that a lot of times for Kiruv, people want to say that you could be lenient even when there's no halachic reason for it, because it's for Kiruv. You have to be lenient for Kiruv. People, Bali Tshuva, you got to make it easier for them. Now, it's definitely true that if you could find a legitimate heter, that's okay. But if, let's say, something's completely usher, and you just want to say it's okay because, listen, they're involved in Kiruv, the Bali Tshuva, you got to make it easier for them, that's not allowed. I saw an unbelievable mashal for it from the Sefer Lev Avram. Rav Avram Weinfeld, he writes, he gives a mashal. It's the equivalent of a person taking over a very, very, very expensive, fancy steakhouse. So let's say you take over, I don't know, La Marais, you take over a very fancy steakhouse, and the average steak costs $30. And the owner comes over to you and he says to me, Avi, can you just run the store for one day? I have to go out of town. Run the store for a day. And you're sitting there and you notice not many people are coming in. It's unbelievable food, great quality food, but for some reason, it's beyond you the reason, but no one's coming in to buy it. You can't understand why. So what you decide is, I have a plan. The owner comes back the next day, he sees the place is buzzing, it's crazy, it's packed. He goes over to me and he says, so what'd you do? How'd you get the business so great? So he says, the person tells the owner, I had a great idea. I just lowered the price from $30 a steak to $2.99, $3 a steak. And all of a sudden it's coming from all over. Is the owner happy or is the owner unhappy? The owner is extremely unhappy. Even though the whole store, everyone's packed in, everyone's coming to eat your food. But you're losing money. And it was not the person that you put in charge for one day, it's not his store. And it's not up to him to decide the prices. That's beyond his pay grade. It's not up to you. If a waiter just decides to start making up prices just to bring more people in the store, the owner won't be happy. That's not your job. Your job is to sell the merchandise I give you, not to change the prices. It's not up to you. So says Rav Weinfeld, it's the exact same thing. As every Jew, we come down to this earth and we're given this precious steak of the Torah. We have one job. We're supposed to sell it. We're supposed to try to bring people close, do our best. What happens if nobody's coming? Unfortunately, many from Jews don't want to keep Shabbos. They don't want to. They're not coming to eat my food. They're not coming to enjoy from the Torah. You know what? If we start cheapening the product, we start changing the prices from $30 to $2.99 just to have people come in, Hashem's not happy with that. The product, the Torah, is not ours to cheapen. It's not ours to determine the price. Our job is to sell. However many people we sell or not, that's our job. We can't start tampering with the authenticity of the Torah. That's beyond our pay grade. It's like the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal used to say. They heard this, I think, from his grandfather-in-law, I think the Mittler Rebbe, that it's like doing kiruv is like putting out a fire. So you have to, when the fire is burning, you got to take water, you got to throw the water out, get the fire out. No matter what you have to do, you have to get that fire out. When someone's not keeping Shabbos, it's like a fire. You got to put the fire out. But what happens is, instead of taking water, you take kerosene, and you pour kerosene on the fire. It's just going to make it worse. Sometimes in our attempt to put out the fire, in our attempt to bring people closer, we're actually pushing them further away. So that's why when a rabbi is asked a halachic question, sometimes it's not the popular answer, but sometimes it's the correct answer. So going back to what we were saying before, the Magen Avram writes, whether it's popular or not, that a married Jewish woman, a man is never allowed to listen to a married Jewish woman speak. Never. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go a person's wife. Are you allowed to listen to your wife sing? So, as we saw before, during davening, no. During davening, absolutely not. But what about not during davening? So it seems it may depend on whether she is a nida or not. If the wife went to the mikveh and she's pure, she's not a nida, she hasn't seen blood. I'm not getting involved right now, definitely not right now in those halachas. But if she's not a nida, she went to the mikveh, and therefore they can potentially have relations. The halacha is it's clear from the Ramah in Siman Ayin Aleph Sif Gimel and Arachayim that you're allowed to listen to her sing. Meaning a man is allowed to listen to his wife sing. We'll see exactly when, but a man is allowed to listen to his wife sing. Not during davening, but if he's not davening, if she just wants to, they're taking a road trip and she wants to sing, so if she went to the mikveh and she's tahar, he's allowed to listen to her sing. What happens if she's not tahar? She's a nida. She saw blood and now she's in the process of the month where she's a nida. So is a man allowed to listen to his wife sing when she's a nida? So the Sefer Chemdas Moshe, Tefes Re'im, all say it's mutter. Rav Yosef Zatzal in Yabi Omer Chelik Dalid Yerodei Siman Tesvav, he writes, Harotze lochush lamachmirim tavlo bracha. If you want to be stringent, it's a great thing to do. But if you want to be lenient, you could be lenient. So according to Rav Avadia, if the wife's a nida, you may be lenient to listen to her sing. However, the Pischei Tshuva disagrees, and Rav Moshe Feinstein, so the Pischei Tshuva is in Yerodei Siman Kuf Tzadi Hey Sifkat and Vav. He says tzarachin. He says I don't know what the halacha is, and Rav Moshe Feinstein in Yerodei Chelik Beis Siman Ayin Aleph Divrei Maschil Bedavar writes, "Ubedavar kol beishtei nida." If your wife is a nida, she's impure, ritually impure. In mutar l'shmaya kishem mazameres, are you allowed? If the question that you ask whether you're allowed to listen to your wife who's a nida sing, hine hapischei tshuva nisha b'tzarachin. The pischei tshuva says he's not sure, v'lochin marar lahachman. Therefore, one should be stringent. So Rav Moshe says you should be stringent. The Aruch HaShulchan also says to be machmer. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is also of the opinion that you have to be stringent. I saw that Rav Azriel Orbach Shlita in Sefer Levushay Hayes also writes that the common custom is to be stringent. So therefore many poskim are machmer. Again, if you want to be lenient, you have what to rely on. Rav Yosef says you can be lenient, but many poskim are machmer. So that's if your wife. So that's the discussion of your wife. So if she's ritually pure, you can listen to her not during davening. If she's ritually impure, it's a machlokas. Now what about listening to a single girl? A Jewish girl who's single, she's not married. If she's married, it's a problem. She's not married. So the poskim tell us it depends on whether she's pure or not. Meaning it depends whether she's over the age of 11 or 12 or not. Meaning if she saw blood, if she's seen blood, then she's considered a nida. Then most poskim say you're not allowed to listen to her. If she hasn't seen blood yet, if she's a young girl, she's 8 or 9 years old, technically you can listen to her, it's not going to be a problem. And as I said, so there's a big shaila in the poskim whether you're allowed to listen to your sister sing. It's a very interesting shaila because it's very hard. I can't. Again, there are a lot of stuff I can't get into right now, but it's very difficult in halacha to try to figure out how to determine the relationship between a brother and a sister, because we know that at least for momentary, not for long-term purposes, a man is allowed to seclude yichud, lock the door in a room between him and his sister, which means we already see that there's not such a concern that a man is going to have inappropriate relations with his sister. We're not concerned about that. On the other hand, physical contact between a brother and sister is not so simple that it's allowed either. So it gets very complicated in halacha. So I can tell you like this: when it comes to the sister, whether you're allowed to listen to your sister sing, many paiskim are machmer. Many paiskim are machmer. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says in the Sefer HaKatan V'Al-Chaysav, Choshbani Shalonachan Adav, I don't think it's appropriate. And the Archas Rabbeinu in Chelik Aleph Daf Nun Hey, it says that the Chazon Ish felt that it's forbidden. This is very relevant. Meaning if she's, to listen to your sister sing may not be the most permissible thing in the world. It's a shaila, and you have to ask a rav. But the reason why this is so relevant is because a lot of times they have these like Beis Yaakov and all these schools, they have like these plays where they sing. They have these like singing plays that the girls. I don't know. I can't think of the name of it. I'm sure my sister knows the name of it. But they have these plays where the girls they put on a play and they sing. And if a brother, and a lot of times they invite the family. So whether a brother can go, it may be problematic. Now, it's probably going to be a problem anyway because there are going to be other girls singing, and the brother's not allowed to listen to those girls. But the point is, even if it's just a solo, you're coming just to hear your sister sing, and then you're leaving. It's not so pashut. It's something that's best to be avoided. So I want to be ma'ir something that a lot of poskim say. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was a little lenient, but many poskim are machmer. Oh, one more thing before we continue. I'm sorry. The halacha is that Ramesha Feinstein writes, we saw that when it comes to a Jewish girl, before the age of 11 or 12, it's permissible to hear her sing. Meaning if you have a concert and they're all 7, 8 years old, that's okay if they're Jewish. Ramesha Feinstein writes that when it comes to non-Jews, you're not allowed to listen to a non-Jew at all. Once they're the age of 3, you're not allowed to listen to a non-Jewish girl sing. So all these, you can't go to a choir even if it's young girls. If they're non-Jewish women you're not allowed to listen to a non-Jewish woman sing. From the age of 3, it's not allowed. So this, I guess, these affects these type of shows where they're looking for talent, whatever it is, and they have people sing. You're not allowed to listen to it. From the age of 3 and on, a man is not allowed to listen to a non-Jewish woman sing. There's a concept that I think a lot of poskim are ma'ir. The halacha was before that when it comes to a wife, listening to a wife sing, we said that during davening you're not allowed to listen to your wife sing. Under no circumstance you're allowed to listen to your wife sing. So a lot of poskim point out a very interesting problem. A lot of times on Shabbos, the man will be singing Zmiris. Now Zmiris is Torah, right? He's singing praise about Shabbos. Kari B'nai Elohim, he's singing praises to Hashem with Torah words. And if your wife is singing along at the same time, it might be a problem. So that's something that I think the poskim really talk about. In the Sefer Halichos Bas Yisrael, the laws of the Jewish women, he says in Perek Vav Sivches, in the name of Rav Elyashiv, Ubal Moter Losher Zmir Shabbos, Uvach Le'azker Psukim Hashemis, meaning that you could sing the Zmiris, but if your wife is singing along with you, you really shouldn't sing the words of the Zmiris and or the names of Hashem. Meaning you shouldn't sing Psukim. If during the Zmiris on Shabbos he's singing Psukim and he's saying Hashem's name, that's already falls into the category of davening, and he's not allowed to listen to his wife sing at the same time. So it's something a Rav should be consulted as to how exactly go about it, what you're allowed to sing, what you're not allowed to sing. At the same time that your wife is singing, gets a little complicated because a man is never allowed to daven while his wife is singing, and you have to know what parts of Zmiris are considered davening or not. It gets a little complicated. The next discussion I want to speak about, and I think this will be the last discussion, is there a heter? Is there a heter to listen, for a man to listen to multiple women singing at the same time? A choir. Is there some sort of heter? I get the shaila asked a lot. We know that a man is not allowed to listen to a woman sing. That we've already pretty much established. The question is there some sort of heter if he's listening to multiple women sing? Like you want to go to a Broadway show. Broadway, I've never been, so I don't even know. But let's say you have a Broadway show where no woman is singing in a solo. It's all choirs. So the question is it for some reason okay if multiple women are singing? So this is the next shaila I want to talk for the next 10 minutes. It's a little odd because I'm not really sure why it would be okay. But let's analyze what the poskim have to say about it. So there was a heter, a famous heter from the Chassan Sofer. The Chassan Sofer says like this. There's a Gemara in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah tells us that you're not allowed to have two Balei Korah lane from the Torah on Shabbos. Meaning you can't have two Sifrei Torah out and two people laying at the same time. Now why would you do this? I'm not sure. But let's say you have two Bar Mitzvah boys and they're arguing over who's going to lane. It's both their Bar Mitzvah on the same Shabbos. So the rabbi has a very clever idea. Take out both Sifrei Torah at the same time, have them lane at the same time. So the Gemara says you're not allowed to. Why? Because Trei Kali Loi Mishtamai. Because the nature of people is that it's very difficult to hear two people sing at the same time. When two people are singing at the same time, it's very hard to focus on either voice. And therefore what's going to happen is people in the shul are going to try to listen to both at the same time, and as the Gemara tells us, tefasta meruba tefasta, they're not going to get anything. Instead of listening to even one person, each one is going to try to listen to both simultaneously, and they're not going to get anywhere. And you're not going to listen to anything. You're not going to be yotza, because you're not going to be able to hear either person's words, because this one's laning at the same time, this one's laning at the same time. You're going to try to listen to both, and what you're actually going to end up getting is nothing. So therefore, says the Chassan Sofer, this is in his Sefer Sha'ar Taharas Yadayim, Siman Yud Daled. He says, therefore, I'll read you the Lashon. He wants to say that this halacha will actually give us a heter for hearing multiple women sing. Why? He says, if two people lean from the Torah on Shabbos at the same time, the Gemara tells us you're not yotze, because the average person can't focus on two voices at the same time. So too, one can extend that halacha to women singing. If two women are singing at the same time, then you're not going to hear either one, and therefore it should be permissible. It's a very, very, very interesting halachic approach. He says like this: Nistapakti, I'm not sure. Kol Isha im ish ke'echad. If you have a woman, multiple women sing at the same time, or a man and a woman singing at the same time. The point is two voices at the same time. The Gemara tells us this rule of two voices cannot be heard simultaneously. And he continues a little bit. And therefore, because two voices can't be heard at the same time, he never heard the woman sing. And therefore, he'll never have inappropriate thoughts. And he adds, by the way, he says that this will actually explain a problem that he had, that how exactly did Devorah. We know there's in Shoftim, there's a parsha of Shoftim, I think it's the 5th parak. It's called Shiras Devorah, where Devorah sang, and all of Klal Yisrael heard her sing. How are they allowed to listen to a woman sing? So says the Chassan Sofer, the answer is it was a choir. So therefore it wasn't a problem. There are other answers to that of how Devorah sang, but that's the Chassan Sofer's opinion. So therefore many people want to say, if you want to rely upon the Chassan Sofer, okay, so you can go to a Broadway show, you could hear multiple women sing, you could have concerts, choirs having women sing on Shabbos, it should be okay. Now, to be fair, the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelik Yudalid Siman Zayin writes that the Chassan Sofer Kaisav is Dvar of Rakim Estapik Ubad. The Chassan Sofer never meant to actually rule this way. He was just theorizing, but it wasn't meant for normative halacha. However, the Sridei Eish, Rav Yaakov Weinfeld in Chil Weinberg writes in Chelik Beis Siman Ches, that he says that this opinion of the Chassan Sofer was actually endorsed. He says he heard the same opinion by Rav Shamshel Paul Hirsch and Rav Akiva Hilsheimer, two great Gaonim in Europe. So it seems that there is such an opinion out there. However, there are problems with this opinion. Like normally, you hear the Chassan Sofer, okay, you could be lenient. No, there's a problem. There are multiple issues with this opinion. The issues are very, very simple. First of all, the concept of not being able to hear two voices at the same time, when the Gemara was describing it, there are many issues. I'll list them to the best of my abilities. When the Gemara says that you can't hear two voices at the same time, what the Gemara was telling us is, when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, right? It's Parshas Naso this Shabbos. The obligation of each male in the shul is to hear every word of Kriyas HaTorah. I have to hear the words of Parshas Naso. Therefore, when there are two Balei Koras reading the Torah at the same time, it will be very difficult for me to hear each word, because this one will be over here, this one will cut off. They're not going to be in unison. It'll be very difficult to hear every word. But I hear the voices of the two Balei Korah, right? Balei Kriya. I may not hear the words, but I hear the voices. So by Kriyas HaTorah, where the importance is hearing the words, it might be a problem. But think about it in our discussion. I have two women singing in front of me. The issue is not, I don't care what they're singing, I'm not allowed to hear the voice of a woman. when they're singing. I'm not allowed to hear them hum. I'm not allowed to hear them sing a melody without words. So even if I were to assume, I would accept the assumption that the Gemara has, that two people singing in unison, it's very difficult to ascertain what they're singing. But I definitely hear the voice. So at the end of the day, all the Gemara was saying is that, let's say when it comes to, I have to hear Parsha Zachar, or I don't know, we'll talk Parsha Zachar in a minute. I have to hear Kriyas Torah on Shabbos. So if there are two people learning from the Torah at the same time, it'll be difficult for me to ascertain what they're saying. But I'll definitely be able to hear the voices. So how could you extend that ruling to this discussion of women singing? With women singing, we don't care what they sing. There's a prohibition of hearing the voice of a woman. If anyone tells me, if I have two people singing right in front of me, you're going to tell me that each voice cancels each other out and I can't hear the voice of a woman? That's ridiculous. Even when it's a man singing with a woman, I could hear the woman sing. I can hear her voice. I may not be able to tell what word she's singing. Let's say I have a man singing Kari Bain and a woman singing Kari Bain. Yeah, can I tell you when I hear the word Ka or Ribain, can I tell you who said the word Ribain? No, I may not be able to tell you, but I could hear the woman's voice. So how could you extend it? The halach over here is that a man's not allowed to hear the voice of a woman because it creates inappropriate thoughts. So the fact that there are two women singing makes it better? I may not be able to tell what words they're saying, but it should be a problem. Two, the second issue is, usually the way it works is they bring this down from the Stipler. When there's a choir, the Gemara may not have been relevant at all. All the Gemara is saying is that two people speaking at the same time, it's very difficult to ascertain what they're saying because they're not in unison. But when people sing, they try to get in unison, right? When people are in a choir, they actually try to get in unison, so you would be able to hear what they're saying. So it's problematic also on the second level. On a third level, that same Gemara that tells us that two people learning from the Torah at the same time, you're not Yotze, the Gemara says that by Kriyas HaMegillah, if two people are learning from the Megillah on Purim at the same time, you are Yotze. What's the difference? Meaning two people learning from the same time on a Shabbos, you're not Yotze. Two people learning from the Megillah on Purim, you are Yotze. What's the difference? So the Gemara tells us Purim is so rare to hear the Megillah. People are so excited, are so interested in hearing the Megillah that the chavivus of the Megillah will make us want to listen. Hearing two people read from the Torah is very difficult. It's not impossible. If two people are learning at the same time, it's possible to hear it. It's not impossible, it's just difficult. So the average Shabbos, unfortunately, learning happens so often that we don't care as much. But Megillah, we're so excited to hear the Megillah, we're so interested in hearing the Megillah that we'll focus. So a lot of poskim comment that the same way we're interested in hearing the Megillah because it's a mitzvah that doesn't happen very often, unfortunately, we're also interested in hearing women sing because there's a Yetzer Hara. Right? The Yetzer Hara tells us that we're interested in hearing women singing because that's what the Yetzer Hara does. He gets us interested in things that we're not interested in, or we shouldn't be interested in. So therefore, a lot of poskim comment that when two women are singing, even if I were to assume that it's difficult to hear what they're saying, but the fact that there's a Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Hara will get us to listen, and therefore it should be the same halacha as Kriyas HaMegillah, in which case that it is possible to hear two people sing at the same time. So therefore, it's very problematic to rely on this. There's a famous tshuva from the Sridei Eish, that the Sridei Eish was asked about a Jewish organization where they had boys and girls sing on Shabbos together. So they asked him to rely on this halacha. So the Sridei Eish says he doesn't want to rely on this ruling of two people singing at the same time, that it's impossible to hear, because he says it's flawed. As I said, it's a flawed argument. He does say that maybe you could rely on the fact that some people say that maybe because they're singing Zmiros to Hashem, that no one's going to have inappropriate thoughts. They're davening. It's like he says it's one thing if they're singing like a pop song or whatever songs were relevant in the full 50s, then maybe people will have inappropriate thoughts. But who's going to have inappropriate thoughts when people are singing Kari Bain, people are singing together, words of Hashem? How could you have inappropriate thoughts? That's what he theorized. I'll read you Unfortunately, he had a very beautiful mindset for Klal Yisrael, but unfortunately, it's not true. The Chuvas Kinyan Torah writes, someone said the same notion to the Chuvas Kinyan Torah. He writes, that which you wrote in your letter, that when people are davening and singing Zmiris, they're so interested in praising Hashem, they don't have time for inappropriate thoughts. He says, it's a joke to say such a thing, and only because you're an older man, you're making a mistake that you could say such a thing. Anyone who's aware of what it means to have the Yetzer Hara knows that you can have inappropriate thoughts when you're hearing Zmiris, and the fact that it's davening doesn't affect anything. On the contrary, no one's commenting on this, but on the contrary, that which we saw before, you have to have a much higher level when you're davening. It's on the contrary, when you're singing Zmiris, that's when it's a problem. So therefore, I think it's very, very flawed, and I think it's very, very difficult. Normally, if there's a legitimate halachic basis, I'll say you could be lenient, but I think for hearing multiple women sing, I don't think there's any basis for it. Because I think that any argument that can be found in the poskim is completely flawed and not something I would rely upon for even a moment. I'll just read you the poskim who are stringent. I'll list them to you. The Be'er Sheva, in the Ber Mayim Chaim Siman Gimel, the Ber Yehuda al Charedim Siman Gimel, the Stipler brought down in the Oil Moshe, Rav Vosner Shlita in Shuvah Sheva Levi Chilik Dalet Siman Kuf Tzadi Zayin, the Tzitz Eliezer in Chilik Yudalet Siman Zayin, the Badia Shulchan in Siman Kuf Hey, Siv Kuf Tzadi Hey, Siv Katan Kuf Yutes, Shuvas Kinyan Torah B'Halacha Siman Pei Hey, the Avnei Yoshvei in Chilik Beis Siman Hey, the Isha Yisrael Perik Nun Hey Siman Lama Beis, and the Sefer Neta Gavril Hilchos Yichud Daf Shem Mem Ches, to list a few. So I don't think this is something we should be relied upon. I think, on the contrary, these are things that we have to be makbid on. We have to protect ourselves from these halachas. We have to appreciate what it means to be nizar in these concepts. We'll stop for now, and hopefully learning this and being makbid on these concepts, doing things above and beyond the letter of the law sometimes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will go above and beyond the letter of the law and protect us. We'll have Shmir in Eretz Yisrael, which we all need. Bez Hashem. All right, all questions could be sent to Avi Zakatinsky at